Alright, today we're doing factoring by grouping. So as a quick reminder, factoring out your GCFs happened no matter how many terms you had. You could have done it with just 2 terms, you could have done it all the way up if it had 15 terms. No matter how many terms there were, you could take the GCF of them. Factoring by grouping is a little bit special though. It happens when you have 4, or occasionally 6, but not often, mostly when you have 4 terms specifically. All right, so here are the steps for factoring by grouping. The first thing is to split your expression in half. And that's why it's important that you have an even number of terms, so that you can find it halfway. 2 terms in the front, 2 terms at the back. Then factor each half by GCFs. All right, find the GCF of the first half and the GCF of the second half. Check that your parentheses, or in other words, your remainders, match. Okay. If they match, then you're good to go. If they don't match, this is a good point to pause and say, hey, maybe you didn't actually find the biggest thing that they had in common, or just double check your division. All right, and then the last step is to rewrite it using 2 parentheses. Your GCFs go in one and your remainders go in the other. All right, so let's actually see this in action. All right, so each of these guys has 4 terms, which is important so that we can do it by GCFs, or by grouping. So first thing is you're going to split it in half. And I usually draw an actual line in there. Just make sure that you can tell whether that symbol there is a positive or a negative. So we're going to treat this as 2 separate problems. So I'm going to do the left half in red and the right half in green. First thing is you need to find your GCFs. All right. So the GCF on the left side, 12 and 9, you could write out a factor chart for them, but the GCF there is 3. And then the smallest number of variables. So this guy, x to the third, has 3 x's. This guy has x squared, 2 x's. So the smallest number of x's is going to be 2 for x squared. So 3x squared is your GCF. So we're going to divide everything by that. Divide everything by the GCF. 12 divided by 3 gives us 4. X to the third divided by x squared, 3 minus 2 makes just a singular x. Negative 9 divided by 3 makes negative 3. X squared divided by x squared, so 2 minus 2, 0. No x's left. And remember, you put parentheses and your GCF goes on the outside. So here is my GCF, and here is my remainder. Now I'm going to switch colors, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. So the GCF over here, 4 and 3, positive 4 and negative 3. Well, the GCF there is 1, and since the first term is positive, we're going to leave it as a positive 1. And then the smallest number of variables. So this guy has an x, no x's, so no x's. So divide everything by 1. That makes it easy. You get a positive 4x. Negative 3 divided by 1 makes negative 3. There's my remainder, and my GCF goes out front. So there we've got it. We did GCFs on both sides. My parentheses do match. They both had a remainder of 4x minus 3, which is good. If your remainders were different, something went wrong. So we're going to put our GCFs into one parenthesis. So in other words, 3x squared, and then a positive 1. And then our remainders, I know there are 2 of them, but we're only going to write it once. All right, and there we have it. That is factoring by grouping. This right here, that is my final answer. All right, so they all work up like this. It's really just squeezing 2 GCF problems into one. So I'll keep the same kind of color coding going on the whole way. So split it in half. Make sure you can tell whether your sign in the middle is positive or negative. All right, your GCF between 12 and 4 is 4 with 2 n's. So I'm going to divide both by 4n squared. We're going to get 3n plus 1 for a remainder and my GCF out front. For the second half, 3 and 1, well, the GCF has to be 1. If one of your numbers is 1, it has to be that. No n's. And it is a positive 1 because of that symbol in the middle. Dividing by 1 is my favorite because there's really no math involved. All right, so let's double check that we did it correctly. Your remainders match. They're both 3n plus 1. All right, so my GCFs go in 1. So 4n squared and then a positive 1. And then the remainders, oh, that didn't actually change color. The remainders match, so I only have to write that once. All right, so let's try another one here. So this next one looks worse because it's got x's and y's, but remember, when you're finding GCFs, just take each letter at a time. So the GCF here, 35 and 5, the biggest thing that goes into both is 5. They both have an x, and they do not both have a y, so just x. All right, divide everything out by 5x. 35 divided by 5 makes 7. X divided by x means there are no x's left. Just bring down this y. Negative 5 divided by 5 makes negative 1. X divided by x is nothing. So there's my remainder, 7y minus 1. And the GCF of 5x goes out in front. All right, for the next half, 56 and 8. Well, the GCF here is 8. And notice this one. Now the symbol in the middle is negative, which means the GCF will also be negative. So that's why I keep going on about make sure you can tell what this sign in the middle is. This GCF will be negative. They don't both have a y, so it's just negative 8. Now remember, I always say be super careful with your negatives. Negative 56 divided by negative 8 makes a positive 7. Why? Because nothing happened to it. Positive 8 divided by negative 8 makes a negative 1. And then my GCF of negative 8 goes out in front. All right, so especially whenever you do negatives, this is a really good thing to check. Check that your remainders match, which they do, 7y minus 1. All right, so your GCFs, 5x minus 8, and your remainders, 7y minus 1. All right, for that next one, go ahead and try it. Remember that if you don't see coefficients, you can always put a 1 in front if that will help. Go ahead and hit continue once you're done. All right, I hope you got it. Quick thing that I do want to point out, notice that because this plus sign in the middle here was positive, this GCF was also positive. All right, I don't actually care about what symbol the second to the last one is. I care about the one in the middle. All right, so let's try these last couple of problems. It says factor by grouping, and you'll notice that these guys have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms each instead of the usual 4. All right, I even gave you a note. It looks harder, it actually isn't. Because remember, when we say factor by grouping, it doesn't mean find the first 2 terms and find the second 2 terms. It says split it in half. So in other words, there's the halfway point. 3 terms on the left and 3 terms on the right. And from here, we're still going to factor out the GCF. So the GCF here, 2, 3, and 5. Well, that's just 1. And then I have 3 x's, 2 x's, and 1 x. So the smallest number of x's in anything is just the 1. So we're going to divide everything here by 1x. All right, 2 divided by 1 is 2x squared. 3 divided by 1 makes 3x. 2 minus 1 makes just the 1. Negative 5 divided by 1 makes negative 5. X divided by x. So 1x minus 1x makes no x's left. So there's my remainder with the GCF of 1x. For the second half, so because of my sign in the middle here, I know that it will be a positive GCF. 8, 12, and 20. The GCF there is 4. I've got 2 x's, 1x, and no x's. So the smallest number of x's would be none. And I've got a y, and a y. So they all have a y in common. So I'm going to divide everything by 4y. 8 divided by 4 gives us 2. I'm not dividing out any x's. Y divided by y means the y's are gone. Positive 12 divided by 4 makes a positive 3. No x's, and the y's are gone. 20 divided by 4 makes 5, and the y's cancel out. So there's my remainder with my GCF. Double check that your parentheses match, because even though that's a longer problem, your parentheses should still match. Your GCFs go in 1, so that's going to be 1x plus 4y. Or you could have just said x plus 4y. And then your remainder in the other, 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. All right, and then the second one is similar. So split them in half. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Find your GCFs of both sides, divide them out, make sure you get the parentheses to match, and the answer will be here when you hit play. And here you have it. The GCF for the left-hand side was 6x to the third. The GCF on the right-hand side was a positive 5. When you factored everything out, you should have gotten this guy as your answer.